Probably take a few seconds for people to come in. Here they come. Welcome. Good morning, everybody. We'll just give it a couple of minutes for everybody to get into the webinar. Sometimes Zoom can take a few minutes just to let everybody come in. So we'll just give it 30 seconds and then I'll kick us off. Hello. If while you're just waiting for everyone to come in, it would be great actually if in the little chat box, it'd be great just to find out where everybody's joining from. So if down the bottom of the screen you hit the little chat button and just let us know where you're watching from. Hello from Iceland. Fantastic. We've got people all over. Great. So let me welcome you to our first ever Machinations webinar. We're really excited to be doing this. It's something we've wanted to do for a long time. Today, I'm Matthew Morris. In fact, I'm Matthew Morris most days, and I'm the sales director. I play a whole bunch of games, and with me, I've got Cesar, who's one of our master diagram craftsmen, I would say, and has been my absolute best friend as I've been getting ready for this webinar today. So just to quickly set the scene of what we're going to be doing today and what we're going to be balancing. So we're going to be we're creating an open world RPG game, kind of a dungeon crawler style game. And what we want to do is we want to teach the player that a few new game mechanics. Firstly, that they can craft items, they can use health packs, and we really want to make sure that the player understands that during the tutorial, and then they'll go into the main game. They're going to be finding resources and crafting health packs as they go through. And this is going to be a really key mechanic of the game. But we want there to be some tension in this. We don't want the player to have a huge number of health packs so they never have to worry about running out of health. But also we want it to be quite achievable. We're not looking to recreate Dark Souls. So at the end of this, you're going to receive a copy of the model that we create, along with a link to this recording. So in the future, if you want to, you can go through and you can actually build this yourself with the template what we're going to create. And please do ask questions. So as well as the chat tab, which everyone's been putting where they're from in there, which is great, there's also a Q&A tab. So feel free, if you have a question as we're going through, just to pop that into there, and we'll do our best to answer it on the spot. Or at the end of the talk, we're going to do a Q&A session as well. So any questions you have, you could ask them then as well. Now, what I'm just going to quickly do is we're going to be asking for your input all the way through this. We don't want this just to be a one-way. We want you to help us and give us your input as we go through and balance this. And we're going to be doing this a lot through polls. And I'm going to launch the first poll right now. So hopefully on your screen now you're getting a poll, which gives me the opportunity to seamlessly transition into my diagram. Fantastic, lots of people new to the platform. Give a few more seconds for everyone to vote, and then I'll close that poll. A couple more coming in. And I'm going to end it there. And so lots of the people that we have here today are very new to Machinations, which is ideal. This is perfect. We're going to really show you some of the basics of how to use the platform. Some of you are doing some doodles. Very few people have got to the point where everything's in Machinations yet, which is perfect for today. So this is a model that I've made, which is really just to help us create some data for us to balance against as we go through. I'm going to open up my layers, and what I've done is create a little tutorial battle for the player to go up against. So when I hit play, my player, who's my little orange counter, is going to, no, I didn't hit stop first, that will teach me. My player is going to come into the tutorial stage. It's going to spawn some monsters for them to fight during the tutorial stage. Every time a monster is spawned, the enemy is given a damage value and a health value, and the player is gradually going to do some damage to the health until it hits 0, and then that's going to remove the damage. That's all done through my little damage system, which is really a bit of a random number generator. So depending on the attack value of the creature, it's randomizing it with a random number, and it's also doing damage to the creature through a random number as well. And that's all kept track of in a little health system. My little health system, the player starts off with about 1000 HP, and as they take damage, they need to regain their health by using a health potion, which is done through this little mechanic. Now, don't worry if this is looking complicated for you at the moment. When we walk you through this, you're going to see really how we build these. Once the player's killed all the 6 enemies during the tutorial stage, they come into this little loop to explore the world. And every time they come in, there's a chance that they'll spend some time exploring the world, or they might then trigger an encounter, as it just has. And for that, I've got my main game battle system, which is basically exactly the same as the tutorial. I just copied and pasted it with just one added complexity, that as the player progresses through the open world and they're triggering encounters, the more enemies that they've killed, it starts to increase the difficulty. So this means that once they get past 5 enemies killed, you'll notice this number's just stepped up, and they're now going in and they fight 2 enemies at a time with each encounter. Now, to help the player out with this, built a little progression system, and this progression system rewards the player with 5 tokens every time they kill an enemy. And once they've built up 5 of these tokens, they can upgrade their health level or their weapon level. So gradually the game gets slightly harder, but also the player gets slightly stronger. Now, at the moment, you'll see, our players run out of health potions that we had in there to start off with. So the players now run out of health. So I'm now going to hand over to Cesar, who's going to walk us through how we're going to build a crafting system from scratch. And then we're going to get into how we can balance this and make it a fun and enjoyable game for our players. So I'm going to stop sharing and allow Cesar to share.
Hello, I'm going to share my screen in just a second. I'm going to put that down there. Right. I hope everyone's seeing this.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So after Matthew's presentation, we identified that the focus of today's balancing session will be around health potions. So at the moment, as Matthew showed you, we only have 30 starting potions that we give the player whenever he needs them, but there's no way for our player to receive new ones. So what we're going to implement today is a small system in which the player can receive these potions. And we're going to do that by taking into consideration two key factors. The first one being that the tutorial part, which I'm going to open up, and the main game part should be treated differently. So in most games, the tutorial section is scripted, which means the player usually fights the same enemies, fights them in a predetermined order. And it's also usually where basic mechanics of the game, such as crafting or looting, fighting, are introduced. So the way we're going to handle the tutorial part is we're going to give our player a set number of potions that he's going to have to use throughout the entire tutorial. We're going to handle the main game part in a different manner using randomization, but we'll get to that later. For now, we're going to focus on tutorial. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to delete those 30 resources from the health potions. We're going to start the game with 0, and we're going to give them to the player according to our own rules. Now, since we're going to do it in a predetermined manner, the way we visualized making these potions is through crafting, and we're going to need 3 different ingredients in order to craft them. So I'm not going to name the ingredients in any ways, just going to give them a classic name such as ingredient 1, 2, or 3. Let me name them real quick. We're going to have ingredient 1 here, ingredient 2. Now, all of them are needed in order to craft a potion, and we're going to need them in different quantities. We're going to be using a converter node, and I saw in the first poll that most of you have never used the tool or just made doodles with it. So I'm going to explain what each of those nodes do. So the pool node is basically just a storage for resources. It's used to keep them in and transfer them forward or use them for other purposes. Now, the way we're going to transform these resources into health potions is by using a converter node. A converter node, as the name implies, is used to take input resources. So for instance, by giving it resources from all of the 3 pools before it, it takes all of the required resources and transforms them into our desired output. So for instance, if I consider ingredient 1 to be my easiest one to obtain, let's say I need 5 of it. Let's say I need 2 of ingredient 2, and let's say that ingredient 3 is our rarest one and we only need 1 of it. What the converter is going to do is it's going to take 5 resources, 2 from the second pool and 1 from the third pool, and output a single health potion into our health potion pool. Now, in order to do that, we need to actually set the converter to automatic, because passive nodes, which are placed as passive on the canvas by default, take no action by themselves. By making them automatic, they trigger at each step. Another thing that we should be careful of when using converters is that they are by default set to pull any in the action bar, which means that whenever they have available resources, they try and draw them. So for instance, if I had 2 resources in ingredient 1, let's just place 2 resources here right now, for instance. If I hit play, it's going to draw them and nothing will come out because I don't have all of the required ingredients. So just a second. Let me place that on the top. Okay. So the thing we need to do here is set the action to pull all. Setting it to pull all means that it will wait for all of the necessary resources to be present before pulling. So now if I hit play, it's not going to draw because it's waiting for ingredient 1 to have 5 and the other 2 to have ingredients as well. The output that we want for health potions is something to be discussed, I suppose, because we can craft more than 1 potion depending on the player needs. And I'm going to set it to 3 at the start.
Actually, let's get everybody's input. How many health potions should we create each crafting cycle? And don't worry if you're just kind of guessing, because we might come back and ask this question once we've done some runs and we've seen what it is. So up on your screen is there. Just pop that in. It's pretty tight. Numbers coming up quickly. So at the moment, this is just building how many health potions we're gonna have the player create every time they do a crafting cycle. So perfect. I'm going to end the poll there. Share the results. So actually, overwhelmingly, it's a kind of one crafting potion per cycle is kind of being the winner. So we'll keep it at 1 for now. But how would you make that, if we wanted to make that a couple, how would you change that, Cesar?
I mean, it's as simple as changing the amount on the label. Setting it to 3 would cause the required input resources to convert into 3 at the end. But leaving it as one will only convert it to a single resource. So we're going to be crafting a single potion when we have those ingredients. The next question that comes to mind, first let me set ingredient 1 to 0, is that usually in the tutorial section, the player gets the ingredients handed to him and is presented with the mechanic of crafting. That's why we're going to handle it in the similar way, in a deterministic manner, where we're going to give the player just enough ingredients to craft a set number of potions. Now, since we're crafting one per cycle, I believe we should give the player enough resources to craft around 3 or 4, maybe even 5 times. So in order to do that, we're going to be using a gate node. Gate nodes are, you can think of them as intermediate nodes when transferring resources that that actually sort the resources as they go through. They can be either deterministic or random, such as this. Deterministic ones are used to sort resources in a predetermined manner, and random ones are obviously used to sort them in a random manner. So for instance, if I were to have my ingredients here, let's say I had 50 total ingredients for this example, and I were to transfer all of them on the label. All is, by the way, an available label that allows you to transfer all of the resources present in the pool. If I were to set the 3 output resource connections towards ingredient 1, 2, and 3, after I fix them nicely, you're going to notice that it acts like sort of a weighted distribution. So if I were to label the first one 5 and the second one 2, and just hit once, make the pool automatic and have it set to push, because pools by default are set to pull any, which means that they try and draw resources from source nodes. But you can set them to push any, which will cause them to push resources forward. So if I hit one step right now, as you see, they're going to be distributed according to the weights that we have on our resource connections. So that's why in order to craft, let's say 4 potions, let's go with 4, we're going to be needing to give the player enough ingredients to craft exactly 4 potions, which is going to be our total of 8 ingredients times 4. So we're going to give the player 32 initial resources. At the moment, the pool triggers automatically. We want the pool to send the ingredients to the player so he can start crafting these potions when he begins the tutorial section. So he has the potions available for all of the tutorial battles. That's why I'm going to zoom out for just a bit. We're going to be using our tutorial stage pool. The way the diagram is constructed, and Matthew told you earlier, is that our player starts his journey from this source. He's represented as an orange token that goes through tutorial stage and then advances to the main game part. And we're going to use the tutorial stage pool to identify the location of the player in the game. So we're going to be using the tutorial stage pool to condition our ingredients. This interrupted line is called a state connection, and it differs from resource connections. Resource connections are solely used to transfer resources. So the tokens that you saw earlier, that's the purpose of resource connection, transferring them between nodes. State connections are used to change the state of a node, either enable it, disable it, or triggering it after certain cases. So our tutorial stage is going to be used to enable our, let's call this pool tutorial ingredients, our tutorial ingredients pool. How are we going to do that? As soon as the token enters the tutorial stage, it means that the pool has more than 0 resources. So we're just going to give it a greater than 0 condition. That way, when the player reaches tutorial ingredients are automatically distributed. So now I'm going to zoom out so you can see the whole picture, hopefully. I'm going to zoom out quite a bit. Maybe that's enough. And once I hit play, you're going to notice that player goes to tutorial stage, ingredients are available, they are given to the player where he starts crafting his required potions until he runs out of ingredients. So
it's worth mentioning that when we kind of built the tutorial stage, we made sure that the average damage that a player was taking as they went through the tutorial was over 1,000. So they're not going to get through the tutorial without crafting a health pack and using it. And at the moment, we've got each, the player's health starts off at 1,000 and tries to keep it there with health packs. And at the moment, we've got each health potion worth 150 health points. So love to know, and actually there's been great chat going on in the chat around, you know, how often do we want a player to have to go through this? Obviously, one of the really important parts of this is how much health should we give the player every time they go through that crafting session. So they're finding 8 items at the moment with the way we've got it balanced. We then have them crafting 1 health potion per time, and then they're going to use that as they go through the battle. The tutorial stage is between about 1,000 to 1,400 type damage. Obviously, we've got some randomization in there to account for different player characteristics that we're simulating. This is great. The votes are coming in quickly. I'm going to give it a couple more seconds for people to vote. It's pretty close. Super close.
Don't stress too much about it. It's subject to change.
3, 2, 1, end poll. So here are our results, very close between 500 and 300. So we're going to go with 300.
Right. So then we're going to have to change the amount here. What's happening here is we're using an interactive register and we're sending its value towards the output connection from the converter. So let's say we don't want to, so in order to change our values mid-execution, we don't want to change the label of the connection every time. We can use a converter like this, and whenever we change the value inside the converter, it's going to point out towards the connection and change the value on the connection. So through popular vote, our most desired output was 300. I'm going to change the health potion amount to 300. It's going to show up on your screen immediately. And I'm going to drag it a bit back. So we're going to be healing 300 per potion right now. So since we have our ingredients in place, we have our number of desired potions crafted, and we have our health potion amount, I think we are ready to simulate what happens in our tutorial. So the way the diagram is constructed, the tutorial takes about 40 to 45 steps to finish. We're going to be using our beautiful chart that we have here. I'm going to clear it. So what we keep track inside of the chart is the player HP pool, which you're going to be seeing here with the red color, pinkish color. And we have our health potions pool where we keep track of our current health potions. I'm just going to hit play for the moment, maybe make the speed a bit faster. And I'm just going to hit play and we're going to see what happens. Okay, so let me pause for a bit. We already see a bit of an issue. Since player HP is around 1,000 and health potions are very small numbers, they're not going to be seen on the chart. They're going to be a straight line around 0. We can work around that. Since every pool has a left scale or a right scale, we're just going to use the right scale for our health potions. And now we can track them and see it properly. So I'm going to resume and see what happens. As you see, whenever the player drops a bit of HP, we lose a potion and the player HP goes back up. So the healing effect works as expected. So we already ran out of potions at the moment. The player is taking damage when he's going to be fighting enemies. He's going to be taking damage and be unable to heal. So he's slowly losing HP. We don't have any more potions. So we are at the 50th step. I should have set the steps to around 45. We finished the tutorial and our player is having 94 HP at the end of the tutorial. He's almost dead. So if you were to run, let's say, multiple executions, I'm going to switch the run mode to quick run and we can do multiple runs. I'm going to do 5 of them to see different results. You're going to see how the chart lights up and our executions are shown much faster. So as you see, there's a constant that around 30 to 35 steps, we kind of run out of potions and the player is in trouble. So there's a couple of ways we can fix that. because the tutorial part should be a simple part. The player should not be in danger of dying. He should learn the importance of using health potions and not rely on them too much, but he should never be in danger of dying. So there's a couple of ways you can go about this.
What we're going to do is we're going to ask you for your input. So I'm going to stick a multiple choice question up on the screen. So we've got 3 choices of how we can balance this if we want to. So we can change the health potion value to make it stronger, change the number of health potions crafted per cycle, or we can change the number of times the player can craft health packs in the tutorial. And what we can really start thinking about, even at this stage, is what's that going to feel like for the player? Do we want the player to have to do 50 crafts during the tutorial to get through it? Do we want it to be actually they don't have to do too many? We can really think about how we want to balance the game at this point. Another suggestion just coming in through chat, like, could we change the health of the bad guy instead? Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm going to end the poll there. As close as it ever is. So let me share the results. Change the health potion values with the top one, but really they're all pretty close. So Cesar, I think you're going to have to adjust all of them a little bit just to show how we'd go through and do that.
Right. So since we're going to be adjusting all of them, then I'm not going to change each individual one too much. I'm going to make the potion, let's say 400, the potion amount. The amount of crafted potions will become 2 instead of 1. And the amount of times the player will craft will change to 5 times from 4. So we're going to do 14 here. So now, after I stop, I'm going to clear the chart so we have a better view. We're going to do those 5 runs again, and we're going to see the difference it creates. So as you see, the player is never in danger right now. By reading our chart, it seems the player usually ends with around 7 potions. He ended in the first run, I think, or the second one. Yeah, he ended this run with 6 of them. So 6 or 7 potions. He's left with quite a lot. He's never in danger of dying. This can turn out to be a bit too easy, but for tutorial, I guess too easy isn't that
let's
bad.
Just step down the number of crafts that they have to do. So let's just drop that starting value from, I know we had that at 40.
Yeah.
Let's make that 32 again.
Let's switch it back to 32 then.
Perfect.
I'm gonna do the runs over these ones so you can see the difference. I'm not gonna clear the chart. So as you see, the black line is barely lower than before. That's because we have 2 less potions to work with at the moment. They're still finishing with about 4 potions, which is fine. So I guess this is a, a good point for the tutorial balancing to be done. But unfortunately for us, the tutorial is the easy part since it's predetermined and the enemies are predetermined. And now we're going to move to the complicated part, which is the open world part, where randomness is introduced. So the way Matthew built this diagram is that while in our open world part, the player has at each step, which step can be considered either a portion of time or an action. We can consider it as, I don't know, 30 minutes in real time, or just one road from a city to another, or whatever we consider it to be. We're going to have our player in one action either explore the world with a 70% chance or triggering random encounters with enemies with a 30% chance. And once an encounter is triggered, he fights the enemies to the death and then goes back to exploring, either exploring or triggering new encounters. We're going to be using those 2 pools, exploring the world and encounters, in order to...
We've got another poll question coming up.
Sure.
Like, where should we find the resources from? So we've got the choice there. As Cesar just explained, we can find them in the open areas. We can get them from each encounter. As they as the player kills enemies, the number of enemies they encounter increases as they go through. So we could also do it from each enemy killed in the encounters. Fantastic.
We can do all three of them actually, so
Yeah.
don't stress too much about the vote.
Perfect. So I'm going to close the ballot in 3, 2, 1. And here are our results. So the most popular one is finding them in the open area. So why don't you start there, Cesar, and then we'll let's just build all 3.
Yeah, we'll build all 3. Since the exploring one is the most popular answer, I'm going to be doing ingredient 1 from the open world, since it's our most needed ingredient. And we have a higher chance of exploring the world. Therefore, we're going to be treating it like it's, you're walking through the open world, you're harvesting a plant that you need, or whatever it is, whatever the ingredient is. So in order to do that, we're not going to be using a single gate this time. We're going to be treating each ingredient independently. So in order for ingredient 1 to be harvested, I'm going to be using a source and a random gate. As I explained earlier, it's similar to a deterministic gate, except the fact that the distribution is random according to the percentages that we output from the gate. So I'm going to be using the source as a generation of ingredients 1 in the open world, and I'm going to be using a random gate as a chance that the player actually finds those ingredients and collects them. We're going to need to trigger we're going to need this source to give us resources only when the player is exploring the world. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use a state connection like we used earlier to condition our tutorial ingredients.
I'll tidy up those lines for you.
Sure. Please do. And we're going to be using a trigger label, which is an asterisk. So what the trigger label does essentially is whenever a resource enters the exploring the world pool, so whenever the player enters this pool, it's going to have the source push the amount of resources on the outgoing label for a single step, because we don't want the source to push it every step. We only want it to push whenever the player is exploring. So this is what's going to happen whenever the source, the resource enters this pool. Our source will output the amount of resources. Now, a single ingredient in an area is a bit low, and I also don't want for it to be too deterministic. So it's time I introduce dices on gates. So if I have a label BSD8, it's going to translate to an 8-sided die. So the values can be between 1 and 8 every time. It's pretty random, like dice thrown is pretty random. And let's say it generates 5 resources. Each of those resources entering the gate will have a chance of, let's say, 30% to leave the gate and enter ingredient 1 pool. So in the end, we can have, at a best scenario when exploring the world, 8 ingredients that all go through the gate and enter ingredient 1, but we can also have 0 of them. It's all based on randomness. So a system as simple as this handles the first ingredient. Since we're going to be doing all 3 of them, I suppose, then ingredient 2 is going to be handled with our encounters. It's going to be a very, very similar concept to our first one. I'm just going to copy and paste the small construction that I made above. I'm going to place it here. Matthew's going to help me with the connections again. I'm just going to draw a straight line. And we're going to be using the trigger encounter pool this time in order to just going to move the connection here. Now, since the connection cuts through some of my elements and I want to see them clearly, I'm going to reduce the thickness to 1 in properties, going to give it a lighter color so it's easier on the eyes. And again, we're going to put the label of asterisk. So whenever an encounter is triggered, we give the player resources. Since we only need 2 of ingredient 2, while encounters are a bit more rare than exploring the world, I believe that the outputting numbers should be lower as well. So I'm going to be using dice again, but I'm going to be using a dice of 5. And the chances, I believe I'm going to make a bit smaller, but not too much. About 25% should be fine.
Just a quick question. You've got a random gate there and a 25% chance. What happens if you to the I guess objects that are going through that aren't in that 25%? What happens to them?
Right. So normally, if we had a random gate and a bunch of output nodes and our total output chances were 100%, the gate will always distribute those resources. But like the model we have here, where we have a 25% chance that the resource moves forward and a 75% chance that it does nothing. On that 75%, the resource will get stuck inside the gate, will not leave the gate, and will be essentially wasted. So those are ingredients. We can think of those as ingredients that are present in the open world, but the player never finds. So they are essentially wasted to the player. The 25% are the ones that the player does find when searching the world. Of course, these chances can be adjusted depending on the player that plays your game, because some of them can be real freaks and search every nook and cranny for those ingredients. So that chances would go way higher, probably to 80% or something. But in our model, we're having a bit of a casual player here that only finds the ingredients that are pretty obvious to him. Right, so we're left with ingredient 3, which is our rarest one. So we're going to be getting that from kills. We're going to be using the progression system here that Matthew created, that whenever an enemy is killed, it generates 5 tokens to the player. And those tokens can actually, let me set those because they were set to pull. I'm going to set them to push in order to push the resources forward. There we go. They're going to be used to give the player either health progression or damage progression with a 10% chance on each. So that means that in this case, there's an 80% chance that resources are completely wasted. We can take from that 80% chance and just straight up draw another line connected to ingredient 3, simple as that. So some of the tokens can be distributed into ingredient 3. I'm just going to give a chance here. It should be higher than 10% because killing enemies is quite rare. I'm going to make it about 35% for enemy skill.
Just a quick question we're seeing in the chat is some people are asking, like, what happens if you don't want to just do like a D5, which is kind of 1 to 5, and you wanted to do something that was closer to like a 3 to 8 type randomization in there?
Right.
Or 3 to 9 or something.
Right, so dice is still the way to go, but we use a deterministic number and we add a dice to it. So this number is always going to be at least 3. I mean, it's always going to be at least 4 because dice D5 returns a minimum of 1. It's going to be a value between 4, which is 3 plus the lowest value, and 8, which is 3 plus the highest value. So this is the way to go for a deterministic type. We can actually do that for both of them.
Could you do that for a random number of dice as well? Could you do a 3 times D5 to get a number between 3 and 15?
Yes, but 3 times D5, the way it works is that it first calculates the dice and then multiplies it by 3. Okay. So if the dice returns the value of 2, you're only going to get either 2, 4, or 6. If that makes sense.
Someone's just come up with, can we do D5 plus D5 plus D5?
Yes, and it's going to return a random value, sure. But that's going to be a big number.
Well, we don't need to do that here. It's just to help people understand that logic.
This construction is perfectly valid. It's going to add the results of each separate dice. So each throw will be calculated separately, and they're all going to be added at the end. Yeah, perfect. It's fine. I'm going to leave it to, what was it earlier? 3 plus D5. I'm going to leave it at that. And we'll see how that goes. So with a single connection, we've already finished our ingredient 3. And pretty much our gathering, fighting and encountering system is done with ingredients. All that's left now is to check if our system is balanced, to check how the player does when leaving the tutorial, because the tutorial was in a pretty sweet spot. So I'm gonna set the number of steps to 500 this time. I'm gonna open the chart again. We're gonna keep tracking player HP and health potions. Another thing that I forgot to mention is that for reasons, tracking reasons, we might want to track the total number of health potions that the player has crafted, which means that we can't use the health potions pool because the player drinks them and some of them are lost. That's why we're going to be using the trigger mechanic that I showed earlier. It's pretty easy to create such a tracking system. We just use, again, a passive source. We trigger it whenever the health potions pool receives resources. We use the asterisk and trigger it. And we make sure that the output for counting them is the same as the input. So if it receives 2 resources, it's going to output 2 resources here. And we're going to name this total number of potions crafted. And also, as you can see, some of them have no numbers and some of them have numbers. This is because of the display property in capacity, which means that if I have a display of 25, as long as I have less than 25 resources in my pool, they're going to be shown as tokens. And every number bigger than 25 is going to be shown as a number. So if I set this to -1 here, it's going to show them as numbers. So I'll have my 0 in here. I'm going to leave the ingredients as tokens, just so we can see they're generally going to be low numbers. So there's no need to turn them into numbers. So I'm going to do a quick run first, see what happens. And we're going to keep track of our player. The first 40 steps should be fairly similar to what we had earlier, since it's the tutorial part. And once we enter the open world section, we can see, there we go. So I'm just going to pause execution now.
So our player died.
Yeah, and a thing that we can do here is, instead of letting our execution continue, since we're not interested in looking at those straight lines here, is use an end condition node. An end condition node, as the name implies, stops execution the moment that the condition of the input is satisfied. So for instance, I'm just going to place an end condition node, drag a state connection from player HP, and have the condition set to equal to 0. So when our player HP hits 0, we're going to be ending the execution. So it's going to be game over. I'm going to drag this a bit. Now I'm going to clear the chart. We're going to run again after I reset. Let's start our quick run again. Again, the tutorial is similar. No surprises there. And once we reach the open world, our player is doing quite fine with the potions. But there's a sudden, whenever he's left out of potions, he's immediately killed. As you see, as soon as the HP reaches 0, the game over end condition blinks and execution is stopped. So I'm going to reset. We're going to have to look at different executions right now. I'm just going to run 5 times again, multiple, see if the player dies around the same step, so we can take note of what the problem is right there. Executions should be pretty similar in the first part and quite different in the second one. So around the 200 step seems to be the problem. Yeah, this execution, our player died much faster. He was unlucky with the ingredients.
It definitely looks like the player's not crafting enough health packs. Exactly. How can we tell kind of what ingredients they're not finding? Exactly.
So this is a moment. I'm just gonna pause and reset. This is a moment where we should keep track of which ingredients the player is having trouble finding, because there's probably one ingredient that's lackluster that keeps them all from turning into potions. So I'm just going to show all of these pools in our charts. I'm going to give them different, I'm going to hide player HP and health potions, going to make them not visible. I'm going to give ingredient 1 a blue color. I'm going to give ingredient 2 an orange color, and ingredient 3 is going to be green. Something like this. So now we can keep track of our 3 ingredients in here. So you're going to see a sudden spike at the beginning, which is the tutorial part, where we give the players our potions. Then there's the rest of the tutorial when the player does not have any potions given to him, any ingredients. And then we can see throughout the execution that the blue, which is ingredient 1, is abundant. We can also see in the pool when the execution ended, while ingredients 2 and 3 are struggling, which is not necessarily a problem, especially with ingredient 3, since we only need 1 of it. But ingredient 2 is a bit lackluster. We don't have enough of it. So one action is we increase the amount that the player can find, and we leave the chance as it is, but we increase the total amount of ingredients that we have available for our player. And we can also increase a bit our drop chance from looting dead enemies. So I'm just gonna quickly put a much bigger number here, let's say 4 and D7. And I'm gonna up the chance quite a bit here as well to 60%. So now I'm not gonna clear the chart. We're gonna have a new execution. And once we quick run, again, our tutorial is gonna spike here. Then we're gonna be stuck to 0 for a while. So as you see, ingredient 1 is still, we still get a bunch of it. Ingredient 3, now we get a lot more since we changed the chances. Ingredient 2 is again the lackluster one. If we track player HP, we can see that we died again at the 180th step. So ingredient 2 is seems to be our problem.
So let's bump that percentage up to like 50%.
Yeah. Let's do it even more. Let's do like 60%. I'm gonna clear, gonna stop, and we're gonna quick run again. It should look fairly closer now. The ideal that we want is that all 3 of them hang around 0, because whenever we craft the potions, those ingredients are wasted. So we ideally want all of them to be in a straight line around 0, so there's never a spike in any of them. So as we see, by upping the chances on ingredient 2, ingredient 1 becomes the lackluster one. So that's why we need adjusting. But there's multiple ways we can go about adjusting our
so
potions
let's
here.
Get everybody's feedback again. Here comes another poll coming your way. How should we make the game more balanced? At the moment, our players dying far too early. So we could change the odds for finding resources and keep on tweaking that. We could change the strength of each health pack. We could change the number of health packs they get each time they craft something. We could give the player some full health packs as a reward for killing enemies, or we could make it so that the player can find fully crafted health packs in the open world. Give it another couple of seconds to go through that poll. Give that a second, and I'm going to end the poll in 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll. Let's have a look at the results. So we still got kind of adjust the odds of finding resources, but also I think we're quite high and actually really close for give the player some full health potions as a reward for killing enemies, and maybe making some health potions available in the open world as well as maybe a rare drop.
Yeah. So the odds, we're gonna change them a bit again, and then we're gonna pick one of the 2, either exploring or killing. I feel like killing enemies should be giving the player loot for those potions, so we're gonna be going with that. So the chances, as you saw, ingredient 1 was lackluster. That's why we have to pump the numbers up. At this point, it's more like guess and just run multiple simulations, see how they go, because there's no way you can anticipate what's going to happen with those random chances. So I upped the chances a bit. I'm also going to be adding full health potions that the player can get from defeating enemies. Now, since we've been crafting them in pairs of 2, and we're using the health potions pool in order to count total number of potions crafted, I want to keep the system simple. So I'm gonna have the player find the health potions as loot in packs of 2 as well. So how are we gonna do that? We're gonna drag another arrow from our progression system. We're gonna be using that again. We're gonna be milking it. I'm going to have a converter node set around the health potions pool. And I'm going to have a chance, another chance from the progression system, that one of those tokens can turn into health potions. I'm going to give it a small chance because full health potions are quite valuable. So I'm going to give it a 15% chance. By the way, those chances can go above 100%, and they're going to normalize to be 100. So if, for instance, if I had 60% here, 60% here, and 60% here, they would all amount to a 33% chance for each. So it's fine if we go above 100%, there's no problem there. So we have a 15% chance to convert said token into, let me change the label here, which is having a seizure. Let me move this. We're going to change it to our health potions. Right. So this is supposed to craft us full health potions now. I'm not going to be looking at ingredients anymore. I'm going to be hiding them. I'm going to clear our chart. And we're going to have a look at player HP and health potions again, our main two focuses. I'm going to do a quick run first, see how it looks. And we should see a bit of a spike in our health potions now. They should be a bit more abundant. As we see, we're not struggling anymore. We're actually overwhelmed with potions. We can also see our pool that keeps increasing. So the player is never really in danger now of dying.
So what happens is it progresses into some harder levels. Still pretty high number of health packs.
Yep.
We could tweak that slightly.
We've reached our 500 mark, and our player is safe and sound with a lot of potions to spare.
Perfect. Well, actually, I think that's probably a good point to kind of wrap up our demonstration almost. And actually, what we've been able to create here in just a few minutes, and we've been talking through this, and we've been explaining all of the steps as we go through. It'd probably be 10 minutes worth of actual work to go and kind of create this mechanic and understand this mechanic. And we can then really apply this as we're going through and building the game in the engine. Those ratios of how many items do we need to find, that might influence how to give us the right balance and the right sort of feel for the game that we're creating. As people have said, like, we might want the health packs to be super rare and make it more Dark Soulsy, or we might want to make that something that's less important. That's going to be really going to depend on the sort of game that we're looking to build. But really quickly with the tool, we can understand what those mechanics are. We can explain them and we can talk about them quite clearly because it's kind of all laid out here in a nice logical way. But it also means that as we're going through and we're building our game, we can constantly come back to this model and say, oh, actually, this damage system that we created for the model actually is nothing like that. It's going to be completely different. And we can update just that section and we can run our simulations to see how that looks. And we can see the impact it's going to have. So it really makes it a very valuable tool that will really help us understand and communicate and hand off the models that we're building as we're going through and getting ready to build our game in anger. So hopefully this has been helpful to help people kind of get an understanding. We've had a couple of questions come in. And actually, one of the questions that was in the chat, and it's something that we've kind of been doing quite a bit of recently, is where we've got a label there for the number of health packs that are being crafted per cycle. We might want to track that in the chart. And so we might want to track that in the chart if we were going to export it and we want to do 10 different runs at 10 different levels and we want to see what that is. So the one really easy way of doing that is just by adding a register that's pointing with an arrow, a state arrow into that number. Do you want to just add that in, Cesar?
Sure. So it's going to look something like this. Sorry, let me connect it. And as it's similar to the health potion amount, it's the same idea. We keep a value inside our register, we make it interactive, give it an initial value of however much you want. Let's say we craft 5 of them. We set our label to 0. There we go, it updated. And it's gonna send a value of 5 we can also use the register to registers can be shown in chart, so you can keep track of it. We can also name it amount of potions, I guess, and we can change that during execution. So that's it's really the same idea as our health potion amount.
Perfect. Exactly. So that hopefully that answers one of those questions that I think I've seen in the threads. Just a really great way of just being able to keep track of those key variables, because it can be difficult if they're in a connection to really remember what they were. Sometimes if you're building a complex diagram, I find that a super useful way. One of the questions we had come in was, would we be able to do something similar for dismantling an item and say get multiple ingredients out of an item that we had? So could we flip that the converter around and do it the other way?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's not really it's in a case like this, we're going to make use of both a converter and a gate. So it really depends. Let's say the source will be the action of the player dismantling the item, and it's going to give 4 materials. I don't know if they're predetermined or at random. We can do both. I'm going to assume that they're random. So the action is that the player dismantles the item. It goes through a converter. Our converter is going to output 4 random materials. So we're going to be labeling it as 4. We're going to have a random gate and our 3 pools at the end, which will be materials 1, 2, and 3. I'm not going to name them now. And we're going to give a random chance for each of them. So I'm going to set the chances to, I don't know, 50%, 40%. I'm going to go above 100. So you can see that there's no problem for 30% on this one. So now whenever the player dismantles, let me stop this and switch to our interactive, make the step 1. It's going to distribute all of the materials that you get. You can make it deterministic if you want them in a deterministic manner. So yeah, converters cannot output multiple in multiple ways. So there should only be one resource connection leaving the converter. But at the end of that resource connection, there can be a gate that further distributes those resources in multiple directions. So they work well together.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question has just been in regards to engine integration. So yeah, so we've got the ability to integrate this directly with Unity. So you can see our documentation, and it's in the Unity asset store to download the plugin and SDK for Unity. So these variables that you're creating, you can have these go directly into your game engine, and that could be any number of things. There's a fantastic video that Cesar did with the tank battle game that I've forgotten the name of, Cesar.
Thanks. Yeah, that's
it's
suggestive. Yeah.
Perfect. So this really shows how you could integrate your Machinations model, actually have it running alongside Unity and change variables in Machinations that immediately impacts what you're doing in the Unity engine. Excellent. Any other questions that anybody has? Good. I'm going to put up one last poll because we'd really like your feedback on how we've done and if this has been useful. So I've just stuck up on the screen. If you think this has been terrible and you've learned nothing, hit number 1 there. If this has been helpful and hopefully you've taken something away that you can has taught you something or you've learned something new, it'd be great just to stick the number in there up to 10. And if you will like it, we'll do more of these and we'll do them more often. One of the things we'd love to know is though, like we've just come up with this idea for a webinar today. We'd love it if you if you could let us know any ideas you have or anything you'd like to see. And one of the questions I'm seeing quite a lot of is just around the tutorials. So can you just open up the new intro tutorials while you're sharing your screen, just so to make sure everybody knows where these are?
Yeah, so whenever you create your account, they should be the first thing that pop up on your screen. You see in our template section that we have 7 steps. They're pretty text heavy and use a few nodes. And you can open them via link in a new tab. It's going to go take you throughout all of the steps. So we have step 2, where new elements are introduced. We're basically building a small diagram from scratch. It's a runner game. I'm not going to insist on it too much, but it turns out to be about a 30 node diagram, which explains all of the basic concepts, the nodes, the connections, and everything that we use here. So those are the tutorials.
And just, I can't remember if I mentioned it or not, but I joined the team a couple of weeks ago. I went through and I've kind of learnt Machinations through these tutorials over the past couple of weeks, and I built the basis for today's webinar in an hour or so. So it really is, it can look super intimidating when you open up some of the diagrams and you see all the arrows and everything going on, and it looks really confusing. But actually, when you're going through and you're building these, actually it's very, very simple. I love to use the layers just to keep everything tidy. We've been putting text boxes, which we then just kind of put in the background so that it makes the areas clear. So lots of things that we can do just to make it really valuable.
And there's also a couple of YouTube videos where yours truly builds diagrams from scratch, explaining them step by step, just like I did today. Those can be helpful as well. There are longer videos sorted in parts. So there are some of them in which I build a diagram in an hour, explaining every process that I go through, if you're interested.
Fantastic. And we're bang on time, just about. We're 1 minute over. So thank you very much, everybody. Really enjoyed putting this together. It's been lots of fun for us to do. And we'll make sure we let you know when we're going to do the next one. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.